Hey everyone, what's going on? Mark here from TST Industries, back in the garage. And in this video, I will be guiding you through the installation process of our TST WORX quick turn throttle for the GSX-8S and GSX-8R. Now, a quick turn throttle allows you to have a reduced rotational force needed to get to wide open throttle. Now, when you're using a kit like this on a bike that has throttle by wire, a unique problem is introduced because normally with conventional cable throttles, you can simply get a larger reel inside the throttle, which would effectively reduce the throttle throw. However, on throttle by wire bikes, you cannot do that. They are sending a signal with the system that is internal in the throttle housing. So simply throwing on a larger reel does not work, and it's not really possible. We fixed that problem, and now we have our quick turn throttle tube. Now, on this bike, the installation process is the same from the GSX-8R. However, we are going to film it on the GSX-8S because the GSX-8S does have handlebars versus clip-ons. On the 8R, you can simply remove the clip-ons with the 2 bolts that secure it to the upper triple clamp, and you will have enough free play to remove the OEM throttle tube and replace it with ours. However, on the 8S model with the handlebars, all a one-piece assembly, it is a little bit tighter of an installation process, so we will show you the install here, but just know when it comes to actually disassembling this throttle housing, removing the OEM tube and replacing it with ours, that process is exactly the same. Now, by going with our quick turn throttle, you are effectively reducing the rotational force by 19% compared to stock. And I should mention that we do sell this by itself. It does not include a grip. So if you are in the market for a quick turn throttle on this machine, please note, if you are looking at our product, you will need some new grips to replace the OEM ones. And one last very important thing to note is because this is throttle by wire and not a conventional cable throttle, you do need to remap your ECU. So if you do purchase our throttle tube, we definitely recommend, we actually require it in the product page, that you understand you will need our TST WORX flash for your ECU. That allows us to remap the throttle table so that you can effectively use this. If you install this without remapping and reflashing your ECU with our tune, you will effectively reduce the rotation needed to get to wide open throttle. However, you will notice that your bike will top out much lower than standard because you are effectively limiting how far you can rotate the throttle, mapping on the internal components. Now that all that is out of the way, let's go ahead and begin the installation process. Now, to begin this process, you need to go ahead and remove a bar end. On this case, we have the OEM bar end, so we'll grab a size 10 hex bit, hex key. All right. Now with that removed, we can go ahead and focus on the 3 bolts that are securing the throttle housing together. Now, it is important to note that the bottom bolt here is longer than the upper 2 bolts. Go ahead and grab a Phillips head screwdriver and carefully remove these screws. When you remove this last screw, the throttle housing will just crack open. So if you don't want it hitting your fairings, just secure it in place, and then you'll notice the front cover will be able to just fall right off. Now at this point, we will need to go ahead and loosen up the handlebars. Again, I'm showing this process on the 8S because this is a unique problem found on the 8S. This process on the 8R is actually much simpler because you do have clip-ons. But we essentially need to loosen up the handlebars so that we can gain access and enough free play to remove the throttle housing from the OEM handlebars. So now we will go ahead and do that. Now, as far as marking where your OEM handlebar setup is, what I like to do that isn't a super invasive process is just use blue painter's tape. If you have paint markers or another method, you can do that, but essentially you want to mark where your OEM setup is so that your controls feel familiar when you go ahead and reassemble. You will notice on the front of the OEM handlebar, there is actually a small punched out hole, and that is the center line that sits on the top bridge. What I will do is grab some painter's tape, and on the flat side, we'll line it up along there, matching up with the center line on the bridge. And then I will place another piece of painter's tape on the outer face of the clutch side to know how far of a distance we have on that end. And when we go ahead and reinstall, when we remove it first, we're going to slide the handlebars this way. So actually, let me cut off a little bit here. There we go. We're gonna slide the handlebars this way to give us some free play, and then we're also going to turn the handlebars. So this gives us a really good idea. That's the center line. That's the max out line for this side. Everything else will fall into place. Now with that done, we can actually go ahead and begin removing these bolts. First, you will have to grab a small flathead screwdriver and pop the caps off that are located on top of the bolts covering them. And you want to make sure you don't lose them. They're not really needed, however, it's a nice little accent piece, makes the bike look finished as opposed to just some exposed bolts. And now with the caps removed, you can begin removing the 4 bolts securing the handlebars in place. And just like that, you can see once you break 1 or 2 of them loose, it'll just want to go ahead and fall over on you. That's perfectly fine. It's important during reassembly that we are tightening these clamps down at the same rate to prevent them from being skewed one way or another. Now, we have the handlebar loose and we have it tilted forward. Now we can go ahead and actually push it towards the clutch. And then we will go ahead and turn the wheel in like so. And you can follow the one cable that is coming from the throttle housing, have it go around the upper triple clamp, and that should give you enough space that you can actually take the throttle tube off. And what we're doing at this stage is getting as close to the edge as possible and prying it out. So you're gonna lift towards the front of the bike and then pull out. And what's happening is this lip here is interlocking, and I'll twist this around, it's interlocking on this face here. So you remove it as much as you can. It's just loose enough to where you can actually get the lip over and then off. Now to give you guys a clearer view of what we're about to do before we install our TST WORX quick turn throttle tube, I'm actually gonna go ahead and remove the bolts from the upper clamps completely and remove the handlebars. This is not needed for installation, but I wanna do some justice by you all and give you the best viewing angle possible. Now, you can see here we have 2 notches located on the throttle reel housing. And this is the back face, so the front of the bike. And you can see on our TST quick turn throttle tube, we have a small notch here that will be on the back side of the housing face. Now these notches will interlock in those channels there, but you do need to ensure that the notch on our tube is against the back surface of the throttle housing. And if we take a look at the OEM throttle tube, you can see they also have a part number stamped out there. That is also the part that interlocks on the back side as well. So just a nice little feature to ensure you install this properly. Now what we are going to do is actually insert this at an angle so that this channel here interlocks with this face. You'll notice that you can't just press it in because now you run into interference. So if you insert it at an angle and then press in, you have successfully installed the throttle tube. You can test it out. You can see it locks in place. So that is exactly what we're doing here. I wanted to give you the best viewing angle possible before proceeding. So now we'll go ahead and do it on the bike. reinstall that. And we are going to follow the steps again, notch on the back side of the housing facing the front of the bike. Just like so. Now, when it comes time to reinstalling the front side of the throttle tube housing, you can see here there's a punched out hole on the front of the handlebars from the factory. That hole interlocks with this small piston feature of sorts. It's a little bump, and that will lock the throttle housing in place. And you'll see when done properly, it falls right into place. Let's go ahead and get that done like so. And this will no longer twist. If you are not located on that, one, your throttle housing will be able to twist, and two, you can see that it is not engaging and locking properly. This can allow debris to enter your throttle housing. So you definitely don't want that. Let's go ahead and remount that onto the lower clamp. Straighten our wheel out as much as possible, and then ensure that that little bump feature is interlocking onto the handlebars. Now we can go ahead and grab the shorter bolts, and we'll just catch a few threads in here just to kind of lock them in place. I'm going to do it by hand to ensure we're not cross-threading. Again, just catching a few threads. And then we'll grab the longer bolt as well, do the same. Now our throttle reel is kind of locked in place. Let's go ahead and grab a tool at this point and bottom these bolts out. And you will notice it's much easier to do this with the handlebars off of the bike, which is why on the 8R, this installation process is very straightforward. Once you bottom these bolts out, you want to go about another quarter rotation of a turn to ensure that they are preloaded and locked in place. Any further than that, you may damage the threads internally. You don't want that. Now we can go ahead and remount our handlebars fully and lock them in place. Grab our clamp here. And as I mentioned, when you're securing these bolts in place, you want to make sure that you're doing them at an even rate. If you do one side fully and then try and lock the other side in, you'll notice that you'll have a gap on one end versus the other. So you want to do it at an even rate and ensure that even force is applied across the handlebar. Before we get to that point, let's just go ahead and mount this in place. Get a few threads caught. And now we can actually pivot this up. We can reference our marks, whichever that may have been, just like that, and begin tightening down your clamps. Now, before you lock them down, you want to double check. You can see here that my line is slightly below my reference mark. So we're just going to loosen up just a tiny bit. We can peel off our painter's tape at this point. Before we reinsert the caps we removed, let's go ahead and torque these bolts down. 17 foot-pounds as recommended by the service manual. Just like that. And now you can reinsert the OEM plugs we've removed. And these are just press in. And you will notice that we have this notched out section on our quick turn throttle tube. And if you view it from a certain angle, you can actually see it extends past the OEM bar length. We implemented that notched feature in case you are running aftermarket bars and have longer bars, or if you want to go with a shorter length, you now have the ability to modify it. And you can see here from stock, I'll try and line it up, that is the same length but when it is cut, you can actually see it's 10 millimeters shorter. So depending on your handlebar setup, your grip setup, if you're running bar ends, you may want to go ahead and modify that. We introduced that notch for you to customize it. And just like that, you have successfully installed our TST WORX quick turn throttle tube on your Suzuki GSX-8S or 8R, depending on which model you have. And you have effectively reduced the throttle throw by 19%. However, as I mentioned in the intro, you will need our WORX ECU to feel the difference. Otherwise, you will be maxing out your throttle throw, but you will only be operating at 81% power on full throttle. So please note, if you have installed this or you plan on installing this, you will need our latest flash with the quick turn throttle option selected. If you found this video helpful, you want to check this product out, please be sure to stop by our website, tstindustries.com. The link to our WORX quick turn throttle tube can be found in the description below. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you just want to say hey, please feel free to do so in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell on to stay up to date with all the new and exciting videos we've got going on. And lastly, be sure to stop by our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all username TST Industries. For now, this has been Mark in the TST Garage, and we will catch you next time. Ride safe.